And now, right to your host of this House of Musicians, Barry Smith.
Hey, welcome, fine listener. Good evening, and welcome to this House of Musicians radio show on Reality Radio 101. We hope you enjoy the next hour with us as we do our small part to help promote musicians, bands, and venues. Gary Labar, how are you?
I'm fine. This is kind of a neat show because I won't say who your guest is yet, but it's a unique guest, something that we're going to hear about that you don't normally hear about. So it's pretty cool.
Found him through Eric Elper, sent me an email with his whole bio, and it was completely intrigued. We have folks Rob Nash on the show, and Rob continues to be one of the leading musicians working, speaking out, and singing about mental illness. He's named an extraordinary Canadian, and to me, a hero, the award-winning Canadian rocker and Governor General of Canada, Meritorious Service Medal recipient. Story is one for the ages, but one peek up the sleeve at hundreds of names tattooed on his arm, plus his newly released single, This Is War. I think this is a past article that I am reading, but we are going to hear the song This Is War, which I absolutely love, reveals so much more. So we have just, let me continue. The names of over 900 suicide notes I've received from kids. This is Nash Explains. Some of them have my lyrics as tattoos too. It's a mutual relationship of go forth and conquer. So Rob Nash goes around to schools, is a singing musician, artist, and saves people's lives from suicide and writes their names on his arm, tattoos the names on his arm. It's very intriguing, absolute superhero. Help me welcome Rob Nash. Rob, how are you, bud?
Amazing, man. It's good to be alive.
It's great to be alive, and what a story you have to tell, my friend, and we're looking forward to hearing every ounce of it. I mean, it's such an incredible thing that you're doing. It just blows my mind, but let's start here. When you were younger, how you were introduced to music. Were your folks musicians? Did your older brother have an album collection that you used to listen to, sneak around and listen to when he wasn't around? Or just tell me how you're introduced to music.
Yeah, well, we have a pretty musical family. My parents had 5 kids who had like a family band. It was like bluegrass and like country gospel, pretty legalistic, family religious. And then once those kids were all grown up and getting married and stuff like that, they by accident had me. So I was the only kid in kindergarten that was an uncle. So I didn't grow up in the family band. So yeah, I was pretty sheltered, to be honest with you. So I didn't get to listen to a lot of mainstream music or movies. But then I actually moved out when I was 15. I went to a school where I got a scholarship and some bursaries to play some sports. And yeah, and then I played some drums. Like my dad wanted me to play guitar like my brother Dave, and I was a bit of a rebel, so I said I'll play drums. So my dad bought me a drum kit, and like a $75 drum kit from a pawn shop. And when I moved out to this school, where I lived in dorm, and everybody's like, "Oh, you play drums, man?" I'm like, "Can you play Nirvana? Can you play Guns N' Roses?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to listen to that kind of." Oh wait, mom and dad aren't here, and I became obsessed with music. And then I did pick up a guitar, and yeah, I just that's all I ever wanted to do is listen and play music, even though I never thought it would be a career for me. My worst mark in school is music. I auditioned for the choir, I didn't make it, so somehow I squeaked into the industry. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, good for you, bud. And like I say, what a story we have to tell the folks out there. So your main instrument then now that you play is guitar. You don't play drums on stage?
Not on stage, no. I still have a drum kit at home, and I do play in my studio sometimes. But yeah, I'm a singer of a band, and like most people, it's like you talk to most musicians, and it was their childhood dream. And for me, I wasn't much of a dreamer. Like in grade 12, we had to predict where we would be 10 years after grad, and I said I'd be working at the local bank, but and
right.
I had a pretty traumatic experience when I was in grade 12, and kind of changed my whole life map. Everything kind of changed.
Yeah, let's talk about that traumatic change. I think it's going to lead us to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So yeah, I was 17 years old, living out at this high school. Me and my buddies went for a joyride, and we're from small town Manitoba. So freezing rain, black ice, and we're flying back towards our school. My buddy just got his license, not a very experienced driver. And we were almost back at our school, and we pulled out to pass one last car, and we got hit by a semi truck that was coming head on and crushed our vehicle. Thankfully, my buddies were all fine, but they looked back, and I was laying there, and pretty amazingly, the first vehicle on the scene that happened to be driving by was a first responder. He had just taken a course, and I met him a few years ago. And what an experience sitting down with him was, because he said, yeah, he came on the scene and he goes, dude, you had no pulse, you weren't breathing. And for your listeners, obviously you can tell he resuscitated me. And, he knew that I came back because, if you have a cut in your arm or whatever, if your heart's not beating, then your blood's not pumping. So you actually don't bleed all that much. And he knew my heart started pumping again because all of a sudden blood started gushing out the side of my skull. I had crushed the left side of my skull, one of the injuries. And so I met with him, and he said he was trying to hold my skull together so I wouldn't bleed out before the ambulance got there. And his wife told me he couldn't move his arms for days after that. And they picked me up. My parents came to the hospital. It was about a 2-hour drive to the Winnipeg hospital, and they got me there, and they said, well, his heart's beating again, so we'll put his head back together with titanium, and started many surgeries, and woke up. I didn't know who I was, didn't know who my parents were, and a lot of brain injuries. And I went from a 6'5" athlete to a 6'5" dude getting bathed by his mom. And saying that was a traumatic experience is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, no kidding. It says, like it says here, your skull was rebuilt with titanium, and you had a lengthy recovery, which sparked severe depression. And frankly, you quoted, I didn't even want to be alive. I was an athlete. My identity was lost. And that brought me to a very dark place for 2.5 years.
Yeah, like everybody would say, like, hey, Rob, how's your skull pain? And my shoulder is stainless steel. And they're like, how's your shoulder? And nobody was asking the right question. And that was like, how's the pain inside your head? How's your brain? Because, what happens to you in a moment like that, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, like, I just didn't know who I was. The temporary memory, like my sister tells me, she came, once I came home, she came home to cut my hair one day, and then she left. The next day she came back, and I didn't know that she had been there. So I came back to school, but I'm missing about 2 months of my memory. And nobody knew, but I didn't tell any of my friends or family, but I just didn't want to be alive anymore because, people started throwing all the cliches at me. Some people said it was fate, and some of my family told me that, God spanked you with a semi because you're a bad kid, but the most,
man, that's brutal.
Yeah. But the most common cliche people would throw at me is they would say, everything happens for a reason. And I know people say that with good intentions, but I've met with a lot of people since my accident, people in prison, people in funerals, and people say that with good intentions, but I think it does more damage than good. For me, I was like, okay, this happened for a reason. Like, what's the reason? And it just made me very angry with life. And yeah, it was like 2 years until somebody came up to me and he goes, Rob, you're trying to figure out the reason this happened to you, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I think I know what it is. I'm like, what is it? He goes, the reason you got hit by a semi is because you guys were going too fast on an icy road. Like, shit happens. What are you going to do with it? And that sounds simple, but that set me free. I realized I'm not a puppet. I get to make some decisions in my life. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, I got a second chance. Not a lot of people get that. I better do something with this, right? And I'll never forget, I'm like, I'm done being angry. I'm done being bitter. And I screamed at the sky, and I was like, I want to do something that matters. Like, I want to make my life count. And I thought I'd hear like a prompting, like a gut feeling to like move to Africa and build a well or something, you know. But
Right.
you know how you get those promptings, you
Yeah.
know, you just feel something. This is what I felt. Phone the semi driver that hit you and tell him you're okay. And I was like,
Wow.
what? So I phoned the
Wow.
police and I was like, hey, can I get the phone number of the semi driver that ran me over? You know? And at first they were like, no, but I just kept trying. And finally, when cop he goes, yeah, you know what? All right, here's his number, you know? So I called and this big trucker from the US answers the phone and he's like, hello. And I said, hey, is this so and so? And he goes, yeah. And I said, I just felt I should call you and tell you, like, you know, I'm alive. Like, I made it. I survived. And, you know, I could tell it set him free. Like, the accident was our fault. It wasn't his fault, but this was haunting him. And we talked, and but the important part of that story isn't what happened to him. It's what happened to me. Like, that was the first time I felt like I had done something that mattered to anybody but myself. It felt good. And I was like, oh man, I want to feel that again, you know? And I was like, man, maybe I can do something with my story. And I've kind of gotten to this place now, and I say this at every concert we play, that, you know, I don't think bad things happen for a reason. I think bad things happen with potential. Like, my accident had the potential to leave me angry, bitter, suicidal the rest of my life. Or there's the potential I could take my story and try to do something with it. And then I thought, how many people are like me, you know, having suicidal thoughts, not talking about it, especially men. And I thought, man, I don't want others to have to die like I did before they start to live and do things for other people. Because in that 2 years, guys, I I was terrified to fall asleep every night because, man, one night I fell asleep and I woke up and found out I was hit by a semi. So I'm thinking, I'm scared to fall asleep. Plus, every night I was having this nightmare that every night I was had this nightmare that I was watching my own funeral and nobody showed up. Nobody cared that I lived or that I died. So I'm like, man, I got to make something of my life. So I called that semi driver and then I'm like, I need to tell my story. And yeah, my goal is never to be a musician, although I was obsessed with it. But for me, it was like, I want to play music because I knew that would be a good way to tell a story.
Well, you found, you know, I'm sure you made the truck driver feel an awful lot better. And so you conquered that fence. You jumped over that fence too, and it probably really helped him a lot. But not only that, you picked up a guitar, inspired you to pick up a guitar, and look what you're doing now, saving other people's lives. So tell me how you know, it took 2.5 years. You were in a very dark place. Somebody told you this is the reason why it happened, and it clicked. And how did you start to see other people that were having issues or depression and start to, relate with them or get together with them and start, you know, healing other people?
Yeah, well, for me, it started like music for me, first of all, was I finally had a way to get these dark thoughts out of my head. You know, it was get them into a song. So, first of all, it was therapeutic for me. But then I was like, okay, I want to play music, you know, and we put a band together and we had this goal. We wanted to share music and stories. And, you know, we did our first album, you know, we thought we were great. I listen to that now and I didn't even know how to sing, you know, like we did our second album, third album, and finally on the fourth album, we got a record deal and had a couple top 10 hits on the radio. And man, we got to play with some of my favorite bands and big crowds, and it was fun. And, you know, crowd surfing was great, but I was like, when do I get to do something that, like, when do I use this to more than just rock out? Right. And things are going well. We're on the charts and everything. And then all of a sudden I got this offer to do a 9-month tour, just me and my guitar going through schools, 9 months, no pay. And I was like, yeah, this is the right thing. So I walked away from my record deal, refinanced my home. And if you guys know this, if you walk away from your record deal, you don't have a dollar. You just owe money. So everyone thought I was crazy, but I did this 9-month tour and it was just, I would go around just telling my story. You know, I didn't even get into the fact that I was suicidal. I was just like, hey, I had this car accident and, you know, man, make every day count, because you never know if you're promised tomorrow, right? And at the end of that 9 months, I wasn't sure what would happen next, but other communities started calling and other schools and saying, hey, we heard about your effectiveness. Can you come visit us? And so I started putting a team back together, and I talked to some people and put together a charity. And what was supposed to be a 9-month tour kept growing. And one day I got called to a school in Ontario, and they said, we heard about your effectiveness. And they said, can you come right away? Because um, we just lost a girl to suicide. And on her suicide note, it revealed that she had a pact, like a deal with one of her friends. If you kill yourself, I'll kill myself. Principal said, we don't know who it is. So we we flew out there, and it was an odd feeling. There's like 1,000 students sitting in front of me, and I'm thinking, somebody in front of me is about to take their life, and I don't know where they're sitting. And our show is like, I tell a story, play a song, tell a story, play a song. And I got to this place, I was like, man, I gotta say it, that I was there once too. And I was terrified, because I'm thinking, I'd never said this to anybody. My band didn't know this. And I'm thinking, what are the staff going to think of me? What are the students going to think of me? Because I thought that they'd view me as weak. And I got to this place and I said, I know somebody in this audience is thinking about taking their life. You're not alone. I was there once too. And I braced for the impact, but it felt like 1,000 pounds off me. And the relationship between me and the audience just went to another level. And afterwards, I'm getting hugs, and people are sharing their stories with me. And then this girl walks up, and she takes an old folded up note out of her pocket, and she hands it to me. And I'm like, what's this? She goes, my suicide note. I was like, what? And she walked off with the school counselor to get help. And I'm thinking, well, that's why they brought me there, to find her. But I was so confused. Like, this wasn't a freshly written note. And I spoke with a police officer that deals a lot with teen suicides. And I said, why did she have the note with her? And the police officer said, yeah, very rarely is the note freshly written. People write their note and they carry it with them for 2 to 3 months before they take their life, waiting for somebody to push them over the edge, or for somebody to reach out and say, you're not alone. You're not alone, So then it's a few days later, another 1,000 kids in front of me. And I'm thinking, well, if the stats are true, from our partners at Kids Help Phone, pre-pandemic, 1 in 5 teenagers had seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. So I'm like, well, if that's the stats, that means somebody sitting in front of me is thinking about it again. So I said it again, and it was a little easier this time. I'm like, I know somebody sitting in front of me is thinking about taking their life. You're not alone. I was there once too. And this young guy came up to me. He hands me his note. And yeah, like you said, 917 students gave us their suicide notes after our shows, and got the help that they needed. And not to mention all the razor blades from people that were cutting, and all the video clips people would send us on Instagram and Facebook, and of them ripping up their notes or burning them. And this suddenly became a focus. And then we could not meet the demand anymore. We were doing 150 shows every 8 months. And finally, we started going to bigger venues, setting up in theaters. And our last show was at the arena in Medicine Hat. We had over 20 schools there. We paid for the venue, the lights, the sound. We paid for the security. We paid for the school buses and the gas, because there's no money for the schools to have these resources. So it was big. And then the pandemic hit, and I just braced, because I didn't know if this was going to be 2 months or 6 months of lockdown, but I did know this: isolation and depression is a bad combo. And man, has that been true.
Yeah, well, geez, what a story. And now here you are going around, playing for different schools and saving kids' lives and adults, I'm sure adults too. So it's an absolutely amazing story, Rob. And I want to ask you about why you started tattooing their names on your arm, which is absolutely amazing. But before I do that, I want to play one of your songs.
Sure.
So let's play a song. Just before we play a song, though, I just want to tell folks out there, if you like classic rock and roll, then you do not want to miss these very talented musicians in their upcoming show. The band is called Reckless Rock and Roll. And that's exactly what they do. They rock. Reckless Rock and Roll are playing March 18th, 2022 at the Smoke Show Barbecue and Brew, 744 Mount Pleasant Road, Toronto, Ontario. Start time 9 p.m. You can check them out on YouTube. They're called Reckless Rock and Roll, a great little rock band to go see. Rob, what an amazing, amazing story, and the stuff that you're doing now. You're telling me, which I wasn't aware of, that you're actually paying to be able to do these gigs to help save lives. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, bud.
Yeah, we've seen some amazing things, though. We would just go and foot the bill, and then you get a message from a grandma, grandpa saying, "Hey, thanks, you helped our granddaughter," and you get donations and stuff. And at first, it was a rush, or it was terrifying because, how are we going to pay the bills? But after a while, it was just exciting. And then, we'd have one couple. They bought us one of the tour buses that Adele was renting for her tour, 15 flat screen TVs inside. And they said, "Here's the keys, keep going." We've had, we've had airlines that fly us up to reserves, prison shows that we do. And then we started getting bigger sponsors and supporters as well, like Royal Bank, Wealth Management stuff, people saying, "How do we help this? How do we help you get this message out there?" It's been just an absolute rush, So, yeah. And you're talking about this song, "This Is War," we got, before you play it, if you don't mind me explaining the song,
Absolutely.
I got this one award, and I felt really awkward because I'm backstage, and the other three guys getting the award, they were wearing their army fatigues and they're missing limbs. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I'm just a musician. But before they introduced me, they said, "This next guy is fighting a different kind of a war against an invisible enemy called mental illness." And the musician in me was like, "Ooh, I got to write about that," Yeah. So in this song, it talks about this invisible war that we're in, or the invisible enemy. And it talks about the fact that, in the Western world, but especially North America, we think we've created paradise, but is this the promised land? Because look at all the suicides, look at all the overdoses. And it talks about the fact that it's time that we unite, because, we can get into this more after the song, but I think we're losing some of the most gifted people. After talking with hundreds of thousands of young people, when I meet somebody that says they've been diagnosed with depression and they have suicidal thoughts, I just go like, "So do you dance? Do you sing? Do you paint? Poetry? What do you do?" It's like, "Yeah, I paint. How did you know?" I think there's a connection between the arts and mental illness, because I'm an artist, and some people, when they go through something, they can wipe it off and keep walking. I couldn't. I go through a tough day and I feel like cursed with extra emotion. And until I realized I could channel it into a song, it almost overwhelmed me and I almost took my life. Look at Hollywood. Look at Kurt Cobain. Look at Chester from Linkin Park. Look at Robin Williams. These artists.
Cornell, yeah, the list goes on and on, doesn't it?
Right. So for me, when I meet somebody, it's like, hey, medication has helped a lot of people, but for me, it's like, don't shut that off, channel it. So in this song, "This Is War," it's just like, it's time that we unite, because I think we're losing some of the most gifted people. These people that I've met, they are like angels. They are so gifted. I've never met a mom and dad that has lost their kid that says, "It's a good thing our daughter's no longer here. She had nothing to offer this world." It's always the opposite. She was so gifted. How did she not see it? And it's a war I didn't expect to be in, but bodies have filled the streets. Blood is beneath our feet. And it's time that we unite and fight on their behalf.
Absolutely. And you're saying that, the people are angels. And I believe that about you for what you're doing. Folks, I have Rob Nash on the show. We're going to listen to his song, "This Is War," on this House of Musicians radio show right here on Reality Radio 101.
rising. Oh, it's a sight to behold. Are all the angels in hiding, or is their story untold? So now it's those demons I'm fighting. It's time to take back control. And with the angels beside me, we'll take back the lines that you stole. Yes, this is why. So this is freedom. So this is where we stand. This is the promised land. So this is why. So this is freedom. Where is the God we trust? Somebody called out love. And it's killing me. Oh, it's killing me. 'Cause this is war.
Hey, welcome back, folks. As Gary says, it's a pleasure to have everybody listening tonight. We have a special human being on the show tonight, Rob Nash, and we just heard his song, This Is War. If you just tuned in, Rob has a band and plays around Canada and literally saves people from suicide. He gets hundreds of letters, thousands of letters, and I want to ask you about the tattoos on your arm, but let's talk a little bit more, Rob, about This Is War. What a great song, bud.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, you know, my when we did our first few albums in small studios in Winnipeg, and when I got the record deal, went out to this studio in Vancouver. It was pretty intimidating, and I got to meet some fantastic multi-platinum producers. And when I walked away, you know, everybody parted ways, and they didn't know what happened to me. And I was at a school, going to speak at a school in Vancouver, and it was not far from the studio. So I popped in there, and they were like, Rob Nash, and they're like, you know, what happened to you? You just disappeared. I told them what I was up to, and I said, you want to come see what I do? So they took the time out and came watch the show. And my producers said, dude, we don't care that you don't have a record deal anymore. We want to be a part of this team. So the reason it sounds so good is because those producers have been a part of my team, and they produce my stuff for free. And now they are a big part of our team, and they tour with us when we are on the road. So Steve Smith, Anthony Anderson are just incredible guys that make the music sound as good as it does.
And you know what? It costs so bloody much to go and record a song these days in a studio, that they're on board with you to help save people as well. People with depression, people that are contemplating suicide, they're on board to help you as well. Let you come into the studio and record. That's phenomenal. Cahoots out to those folks too.
Yeah, well, I think everybody wants to be a part of something big, and you guys know this, the music industry, you know, there's a lot of BS in there, you know. And these guys are like, we've never felt so fulfilled. And Eric Alper that hooked up this interview, he's like, you know, he was helping with just, you know, as a publicist, hooking me up. And he just emailed last week and said, dude, I've never felt so fulfilled. I want to keep doing this for free for you. And I'm like, wow. And Jeff Rogers and Warner Music heard about what we're doing, and they're like, we want to help push this to radio. So it's kind of come full circle now. You know, I wanted to keep things underground when I was going to, you know, not just schools, but prisons and youth detention centers and reserves. Like, I didn't want any of the students to think this was a publicity stunt, but now, because they wanted to see that it was genuine, and now that it's grown into something big, I just decided, guys, when the pandemic hit, I'm like, I guess it's time to share these stories that we've collected over the years. So on top of the album, we've also been over these last couple of years here, we followed up with some of the students that gave us suicide notes, and basically, like, where are they now? And the documentary is all done. We're just meeting with some different platforms to see how we're going to release it. But it is so moving. Like, guys, there's one kid named Dylan, met him on a reserve in northern Saskatchewan. And he's like, man, bullied, suicidal. And I was like, dude, you got to keep going. Somebody needs your story. I'm like, do you like to paint or dance or sing, poetry, anything? And he goes, I love music. I'm like, if you could play any instrument, what would you play? He goes, guitar. I'm like, you got to play guitar then. And he goes, and he points at his arm. He was born, he's a below the elbow amputee. So he has just an elbow on the left hand. And I looked at him, I'm like, no excuses, man. If you want to play guitar, play. And you plant a seed like that with a kid named Dylan, you know? And last summer, he sends an email. He goes, thanks for pushing me, man. He sends me a video of him playing at a talent show, ripping on the guitar, playing Metallica.
That's killer.
He has a callus. He has a callus on the end of his elbow that he uses as a pick. It would be impressive to pull that off with 10 fingers in 2.5 years. And I'll tell you, he's in the documentary. We also took all these stories from these students, and we put them into episodes, and we put together a team of psychologists and social workers and teachers, and we turned it into a school curriculum. We beta tested it into 4 different provinces. That's now available at robnash.ca. And they're just incredible stories. And when we go back on tour, that boy is going to be on tour with me. He will be on stage playing guitar, but not so that he'll be my guitarist the rest of his life. I think he's going to go on and do bigger things than I've ever done.
That's amazing, Bud. That's such a great story. And I love your quote, I'm not a counselor. And this goes to anybody that's listening to this show and, you know, has depression or has thoughts of suicide and wants to reach out for help. Rob is the guy to reach out to. And you can contact this House of Musicians email. Just look for it online, this House of Musicians. Look for Rob Nash. Reach out, folks, if you feel depressed or like you need help. I love your quote, Rob. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm here to get the conversation started and to let people know it's okay to reach out for help. Just to get the conversation started, because most people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can have all the resources in the world, but if you don't raise your hand and say like, hey, I need help, like Kids Help Phone, incredible organization. And we partnered with them where now students can just text Nash to 686868 and it gets to counselors. So, you know, to have these partnerships, and that's what it talks about in the song, This Is War. It's time to unite, you know, because if there's kids like Dylan out there that, you know, I'll say this, a lot of people, if you've never had suicidal thoughts, you know, people don't really understand what it feels like. You know, people even say that, you know, suicide is a selfish act because you take your pain and you give it to the people around you. And although that is true, because when you take your life, you spread that pain to the world around you. But if you've never been there, you don't realize that in that moment, there is a voice in your head that is telling you that the most selfless thing you could do for your friends and family is leave. It is a lie, but you're convinced that you are a burden to the world around you. That's one of the main reasons you feel suicidal. And so for me, it's like how to combat, you know, suicidal thoughts isn't by looking for a world without pain. Life is full of pain, but the antidote is purpose. You know, I lost my dad in this last year, you know, and, you know, I've realized something. Peace and pain can coexist. Like, and sometimes you got to wake up and decide what you're looking for. Like, if you wake up in the morning looking for pain, you will find it. But if you get up in the morning looking for hope, looking for help, looking for strength, you can find that too. And sometimes that's a daily decision. Agreed,
100%. Let's play the next song that I have here for you, Halfway Home. I want to come back and talk about it. Eric Elper, who's an amazing promoter and hooks me up with a lot of amazing artists like yourself, sent me a portfolio of you with 10 songs in it, and I picked Halfway Home. But I'm interested to find out about it. And then I want to come back and talk about these amazing tattoos that you have that is so inspiring. Folks, I have Rob Nash on the show. We are going to listen to his song Halfway Home right here on this House of Musicians radio show on Reality Radio 101. Hey, welcome back, folks. I have a real-life superhero on the show this evening, Rob Nash. We just heard a song that hasn't been released yet, so that was the first time for you all to listen to it, me as well. The song is called Halfway Home. Rob, tell me about Halfway Home.
Yeah, halfway home, I wrote it. Normally when you hear about a halfway home or a halfway house, it's a transition from let's say addictions into back to the real world, or prison back into the real world. And man, I was like, man, halfway home can be a negative statement, but I looked at this song and I took that statement and be like, man, you're halfway home. Like keep going. And the song talks about the fact that when you're willing to be vulnerable and open up about your struggles, you'll meet other people that are going to be like, wow, you went through that. So did I. And there's a line in the song that says, maybe you were raised in hell, then baby, we're parallel, it's just one of those moments where, when you start opening up, you find out you're not as alone as you think you are. It just takes one person that's brave enough to open up, and you'll meet and find out that there's a world around you, people that have felt a lot of the same struggles.
Agreed, absolutely. And again, folks, reach out to Rob if you think you need to. Rob, I want to ask you about how you started and came up with the idea of putting people's names who have contemplated suicide and have seen your shows, or you've talked to them directly and literally changed their mind. You have all these names tattooed on your arm. I just want to know how that all started.
Yeah, so we started just getting tagged in photos on Instagram, Facebook, videos on YouTube of people taking lyrics of our songs and tattooing on their all over themselves, but mostly on their arms where they used to, cut and self-harm. And man, it moved me to tears. I'm thinking, wow, if I'm that much a part of their life, how do I show them that they mean that much to me as well? And I looked at my arms and I'm like, I know what I got to do. And so I took the names and the signatures from all these suicide notes, and I covered my arms with all these signatures and names. And I did it for a few reasons. One, I wanted to be able to show people, show them that they're valuable, And also, I find when people talk about mental health, we only talk about the suicides. And when we talk about addictions, we seem to focus on the overdoses. And yes, we can learn from tragedy, but I think we need to balance that with stories of victory and triumph. So everywhere I go, I show these names, or people ask hey, what's with the tattoos, on your arm, the names, and I explain it. And immediately people go oh man, my niece went through that, or I'm going through that currently, and it's just, it's been such a conversation piece. And, tattoos, can have such a story. Even for me, when I started going to reserves, meeting with the indigenous people and knowing the history of what happened in our society here, there was tension in the room when I walked in. But once they noticed that it was genuine, this wasn't a publicity stunt, they found out that I wasn't charging for what I was doing, that I actually cared. Not only did they accept me, but they embraced me. And, on my right hand, I've got a tattoo of the spirit name that I was given by the chiefs. They call me Yaya Inna, which is, the English name is Bear Chief, which is the protector. And so they gave me my spirit name, even though I'm not Indigenous. And I'll tell you what, not only have I, enjoyed meeting so many people, but I've learned so much from the Indigenous people. To them, a drumbeat is spiritual. And there's such heartbreak there, but I think we have a lot of massive potential future leaders in the Indigenous communities, and it's time that we heal.
Agreed, 100%. I agree with you. You were at a hockey game recently when a woman walked up and asked to see your arm. And of course, you were quick to oblige. You pulled up your right sleeve to reveal dozens of names of troubled youth tattooed from tricep to wrist. Each name is a person who contemplated suicide but then chose to live. Thanks to your music and messages of hope from the Rob Nash Project, and within seconds, the woman located her daughter's name and began to weep. and said, "I don't know how to thank you." I can't imagine how that would have felt for you, bud.
Yeah, well, it was quite moving. She just walked by and said, "Can I see your arm?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And what was moving to her is she recognized her daughter's handwriting on my
Amazing.
arm. And I don't get to meet the parents usually. We do what we do, and we recommend that people, go talk to a school counselor, go see a psychologist, get the help that they need, reach out to resources. But it's rare that I get to meet a mom and dad. But yeah, in that moment, we shared something, and yeah, I filled my arms up. I in the documentary that we shot, I've said I'm not going to do any more names, because my arms are full, but I also want to make sure that nobody ever wants to, like, hey, here's my suicide note because I want my name tattooed on you. It was a statement that I wanted to make, and yeah, it's something I talk about a lot about in the documentary. And yeah, sometimes I'll play with it though, guys. Like, I do like to joke around sometimes when me and my band get on a flight. I'm 6'5", mohawk, beard, covered in tattoos, and you can see people's faces are like, "Oh, I hope he doesn't sit by me." And then I'll sit down and they'll see the names on my arm and they'll be like, "Can I ask about the names on your arm?" And sometimes I'll be like, "You don't want to know." Just let it rest there for a second. But yeah. And then it always turns into an amazing conversation.
We're so stereotyped, bud. Like, I have lots of tattoos, mohawk, long goatee, and we're so stereotyped that people are kind of scared or whatever. But then when you get talking to them, they realize, holy smokes, these guys are pretty cool. At least I hope that's what they think. But I'm just saying.
For sure. Yeah. And to be honest with you, what I love is I love showing young men that you can be edgy and rough on the outside and still be vulnerable and full of compassion and love on the inside. It's okay to express yourself. I always say it, like, tears are like poison. They're not meant to be in your system. You got to flush that out sometimes. And I think, we live in a society where we're just told not to express ourselves, especially as guys. And it's not fun getting in front of strangers and talking about the most intimate parts of your life. But I like just showing that it's okay to talk about it. And I've never had anybody walk up to me and say, "Man, Rob, I was hit by a semi just like you, and I have a metal skull just like you." Nobody's ever said that to me, but they say, "Dude, man, this guy's been through something tough. So have I. He's talking about it. Maybe so should I. He got help. Maybe so should I." And, it's very rare that you have the same story as the person next to you, but we all know what tough days feel like. And if you're listening to this, and you've seen your tough day, you'll meet somebody one day and you'll recognize that pain. And maybe you haven't seen your tough day yet, but when those days hit, you are not alone. And, find a way to express it, even if it's journaling. Find one good friend that you can open up to. And I just want to say, Barry, Gary, like, I really appreciate having the chance to sit down with you like this and chat, because, you're using your platform right now to do something other than just, play music. And when I do interviews like this, I can tell when people are just talking with their brains. You guys are talking with your hearts. Like, you care about what you're talking about. You're using your platform to get a message out there. And so I just really appreciate that we're on the same team here.
Well, we absolutely love what you do. And I love the fact that you say, we can look big and burly and scary on the outside, but we have compassion and love on the inside. So, man, I was intrigued by your story 100%, that you're out helping these people and you saved 800, 1,000. It doesn't matter how many. If you save one, it's all worth it in my mind. So cahoots to you and what you're doing. Any upcoming shows, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while before they're going to let 20 schools come together. This new album, we had to record it in 4 different studios. We literally wrote 18 songs and never sat in the same room together, which was, it was a complex scenario, but we're excited about it, but we haven't even been able to play. So the documentary will come out soon. If you want to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, we'll keep everybody updated. Just look for Rob Nash. It's with 2 B's, or go to robnash.ca. The curriculum, we want that to be out there, the documentary. the music. And yeah, hopefully sometime maybe next year we'll be able to get back out on the road. But I'm just so grateful to be able to spread hope right now, because the world needs it now more than ever.
More than ever. You got that right. And we look forward to the documentary. Do you know when that's coming out?
It's all done. We watched about 16 different edits. The score is done. We have some meetings coming up with some of the major platforms. So for me, it's who wants to work with us. It's not about making the most money. We just want the most amount of eyes to see this, because we want young people to be inspired. We want grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads just to find out they're not alone, and how to tackle some of these tough topics that took me a while to figure out how to speak about this stuff. And I just want to say this. I appreciate you saying that, Rob, you've saved lives. I hear what you're saying, but I've always said this. I don't think I've saved anyone's life. I'm not even trying to change anyone's life. I think change or conviction comes from within. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't come from a pulpit. I'm just trying to make people okay with who they are. That's the first step. And if you can get to that place, then you can start working on yourself and working on the world around you as well. So, one of the girls in the documentary, she was, sexually abused as a child, met her when she was in lockdown. And she says in the documentary, she goes, Rob helped me save my own life. And I liked that.
Right.
And, when we performed our shows, like you guys will love it. I'll make sure you guys get the front row seats next time we're back on the road. But I would tell a story of a girl like Maya, and I'll be like, hey, we met this girl in lockdown. I'd tell her a story. And then I'd say, do you want to meet her? And then we'd bring her up on stage and she'd perform. And, there's another girl named Shay Esposito. She had an eating disorder, a suicide attempt. And I wrote a song about her. And if you go on YouTube, search Rob Nash, the song's called Tell Me Why, and you'll hear her perform with us. Again, some of the most talented people are the ones struggling the most.
Absolutely, bud. And, if somebody can come and talk to you and that changes their outlook on suicide or whatnot, then that's just an amazing thing that you're doing. Rob, pleasure to have you on the show before we go. And you know what, Rob, I want to get you back on the show in a year or so. And after you've done a few shows, and get you back on the show. And I'm sure you'll have a ton more stories to tell. You're an absolute inspiration. But before we go, there's a segment of the show I like to do called, Well, Gary LaBar, what do you think?
What do I think? Does this man need a cape or what? Let me tell you, he is he is a hero. And Rob, first of all, thank you for the compliments that you gave to Barry and myself. It's actually Barry. I'm in a studio just hitting buttons, and he puts it together. And thank you for those compliments. But if I may, your music is amazing. It's well produced, as you said. This is war. I love the keys, the samples, love the guitar sound. It reminds me of Linkin Park. I have to admit that. A lot of it. I mean, man, you close your eyes, and if you didn't know any better, you'd say, wow, Rob Nash is Linkin Park, or vice versa. But, I love the songs. They're really commercial. Halfway Home, we had a little bit of Metallica in there, Evanescence, right? The guitar sound is great again. I love all the samples and the drums, the double kicks, triple kicks. The harmonies were great. Man, I'm wishing you the best. You guys, if you don't get signed, and I know it's not about this, but if you don't get signed to a major label with this stuff, is someone shopping this, those people don't really have ears. I mean, everything you've done, this is commercial hard rock, and it has a story. The lyrics tell a story. The lyrics tell deep feelings. This is what music's about, man. I wish you the best.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And honestly, the Warner Music Canada is helping distribute and get it out there. They've been super supportive. And honestly, the comparisons to Linkin Park, man, I appreciate that. I'd love to say that. I hear that when I'm listening.
What a tour! What a tour that would be. Those guys and you. I mean, my God. Dude. I mean, could you imagine? It's like right into the next band. I mean, and I think they should open for you.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
I'll say this though, you talk about, the quality, and a lot of young bands come up to me and they're like, hey, like, we want to do what you do. I'm like, how long you been playing? They're like, 7 months. It's like, cool. I'm glad you have that desire, but it's important to get good at your craft. Like, I'll tell you what, we played the maximum security prison in Toronto, and you get in front of inmates, bro. And if you want to tell a story, you could have the best story in the world, but you better get good at your craft. So
yeah, for sure.
I've got great bandmates, great producers that help me sound that way. And
it sounds man. It sounds, these people are phenomenal what they do.
Appreciate that. I will make sure to send that message on, because I know you said it yourself. You said, oh, it's all Barry, I just hit buttons. But man, there's people that hit buttons that make me sound that good in the music. If you're complimenting my sound, there's people like you that are helping that. And I'm sure, Barry, you can echo that. There's lots of people, 100%. There's a lot of people that need to be on the team to get anything out there, including a show like this. So don't sell yourself short, man, even if you're not the main person on the mic.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, not just that. Like he makes the commercials and does the ads, and he runs a wonderful program, Gary does. So it's definitely 50-50 teamwork here. Rob, again, thank you so much. We look forward. Please send me a message, or I'll catch one of your promotions for one of your gigs coming up. And the wife and I, Gary, would love to come see you play. And we'll do a little Facebook Live, or maybe a complete interview with you out on the road. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for doing the show. It's much appreciated. Bye.
Anytime you want me back, you boys let me know. All right.
Yep, I will definitely have you back on the show. Now, folks, thanks, Rob. Before we go, I just want to say, put a plug out for a couple of more bands and their venues. Paul Orchard of Colwell Banker presents the Jerome Homer Slow Pitch Spring Fling, a night of live music with an amazing Oshawa band called Roller Coaster. And actually, I'm going to MC that evening. And that's at the Legion, Branch 43 on Simcoe, May 14th. Doors open at 8. And one more here for always trying to help and promote bands. Again, Reckless Rock and Roller playing March 18th, 2022 at Smoke Show Barbecue and Brew, 744 Mount Pleasant Road, Ontario. Start time 9 p.m. Check those guys out. They're a great little rock and roll band. Rob Nash, man, you're an inspiration. Again, I can't say it enough. And we will be in touch. Thank you so much for doing the show, bud.
Awesome. Glad we're on the same team.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And always, if there's anything we can do to help you, please reach out.
Beauty.
Thank you, folks. You've been listening to this House of Musicians radio show. And I like to tell you before I go, again, thank you for being here. Always dance and sing, and let the music bring your soul to the surface for all the world to see. Until next time, have a shuffle your feet kind of week, and good night. You've been listening to This House of Musicians on Reality Radio 101.